Hello. Do you find in your day that there are times when you are more or less energetic, productive, and actually the times when you feel very productive, like you could complete that project, you could finish that report, you could start writing something creative, you could clean and tidy the entire place where you live at a very strange time. So you feel like you could do that at 10:30 p.m. when you're getting ready to go to bed, perhaps. And then when you really, really want to do something, where you need energy and productivity, like a deadline or something you have to do, no matter how hard you try, no matter what you do around you, you can't do it. You just can't summon the energy or the willpower or the focus to just get it done. Well, in today's video, we will go over a little bit as to why that might be the case, with an exploration of your chronobiology, and have a look at some little techniques we can use to help us be the most productive and focused that we can be in everyday life. Of course, this is a ASMR video at the same time, which can aid in focus, productivity by being placed in the background. So feel free to just put this on in the background and work away and allow the messaging to seep its way into your mind and not think too much about it. Or perhaps just use this to fall asleep too, and then catch up on the detail later. Let's start by having a discussion about our chronobiology. Now, chronobiology is the study of the passage of time on our biology, our physical state. You are most likely familiar with circadian rhythms. Circadian rhythms are the passage of time over a 24-hour cycle, and typically mean that you feel more awake and go for a period of waking to energy during the day, and then as it becomes night time you become less energetic and less up and at 'em. Of course, infradian rhythms are the monthly cycles that I'm sure many of us are familiar with in terms of our bodies and biology working to monthly menstrual cycles. But the one that I want to focus on is ultradian rhythms. Now, ultradian rhythms are rhythms that work up to a peak point of arousal and decline over a 90-minute window, the 20-minute de-stress period, and then an arousal once again. And they go like this throughout the day and throughout the night while we're asleep as well. These ultradian rhythms you perhaps may have been aware of, not in name, but through things like rapid eye movement and your sleep. When you are working your way through your ultradian rhythms, that's where you, when you're asleep, at the peak, get the deepest point of sleep, come closer to a point of waking. Now, when you've had that experience that you've perhaps slept for a certain amount of time, but woken up randomly at, say, 2 a.m., but you felt like you could spring out of bed and get the day started. But of course it's 2 a.m, it's dark and cold, for example. You jump back into bed, you sleep, and then you wake up again at 8 a.m. when your alarm goes off. and all of a sudden you feel groggy and like you can't face the day. The reason for that is that you've come to a point of waking at a broken point in your cycle. So in this ultradian rhythm, you actually awoke at a key point in the cycle that meant that you could then start your arousal periods during waking. But if you woke up right here at the peak when you're in a deep point of sleep, or if you're recovering from that deep point of sleep, the body will resent you for it. And it's very difficult to align mind and body, and it takes some time to get used to. So what's interesting to know is that you may not have thought of this before unless you've had those random experiences of feeling more productive at a strange time, less productive at a needed time. But you are more proactive and engaged and focused at your peaks of your cycle and less focused at your decline of your cycle. 90 minutes, 20-minute rest period, 90 minutes, 20-minute rest period. Now, of course, the working world or your education, these are all designed around a very industrialized concept. Of course, Henry Ford, the alleged inventor of the 40-hour working week, designing it so that that was the point in which people were able to give as much as they could without keeling over. It's designed around arbitrary business need, not necessarily your own biological need. Some of us may be in positions where it is quite difficult to work within these structures of being able to order what you do in a day to benefit your cycles, because you'll have very strict timetables of what you need to do and when. But by understanding your rhythms, at least you can become less guilty and place less of an emotional tax or burden on yourself for not performing at your best at certain key points when you know why. And for others, you may have the ability to structure your day in whichever way you like within a certain framework. So if you're at work or education and study time, and you have 4, 5, 6 hours where you need to complete certain tasks, but it's completely up to you as to how you do that, then by understanding your rhythms, you can greatly support yourself in getting the most out of every day. Let's have a look at what we're talking about here with an exploration of the ultradian rhythms. So if we draw out a little graph for your ultradian rhythms, they look a little bit like this. And this is over a period of 90 minutes. From here to here. And this is a 20-minute rest period. And then, of course, we build up and we decline in our energies. So the way to think about this is, if we look at our working day or our daily lives, perhaps you could break it down into a series of hours. Let's say 8 a.m., 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, and so on and so forth. And actually, if I keep a journal or a record of when I feel most productive or least productive, it might start to take shape that I am following these rhythms. And it means that if I want to get things really done, I know my sweet spot is around about 9:30 in the morning. And I know that if I am planning on doing anything intensive, it's best not to schedule it in around 11 to 12. Some people might find that where they are, they end up taking a lunch break or an hour break, say around here, about 1 o'clock, for example. But what you might not realize is that you're actually getting in the way of your peak productivity period. So when you feel like you're on lunch, but you could go and paint the town red, this could be because you are actually taking a rest, in inverted commas, at a time when your body desires to be least restful. It could be that you've scheduled in something of high intensity for a point when actually your mind, your focus, your biology requires a rest period. And those moments where you've sat down in front of a laptop and opened it up, and the very last thing you want to do is start typing or start working, this could be the reason why. Now, some of us, like I'll get onto in a little bit more detail, may have, when we start out, waves that look a little bit more like this. So we're not as intensely trained or focused yet in our biology to be able to see these high peaks and then rests. And actually we find that our peak is of a far lower intensity and lasts for a longer period of time, and then has a longer period of de-stress and arousal. So it can often mean that we feel quite sluggish, or that we find it difficult to find focus and productivity in our day. You may find that you're only able to do one major task a day or complete a major task a day. So there are certainly techniques that we can use to build on that. Now, what's interesting is that the classic ultradian rhythm of 90 minutes arousal period to 20 minutes rest or de-stress is actually peak efficiency. So to be able to get yourself to a point whereby you are able to consistently work to this particular rhythm, you may need to train yourself to do that. There is something known as the Pomodoro technique, so called after the little tomato kitchen timers. Pomodoro, tomato, Italian, sorry. And it involves setting intense periods of mental exercise and activity for, say, 3 minutes, and then you take a break for 3 minutes, and then you go again for 3 minutes, take a break for 3 minutes, and you build it up and up and up and up until you build this stamina for being able to work in intense, focused bursts. I surely recommend looking up the Pomodoro technique. You'll find plenty of content on YouTube talking about the Pomodoro technique. It's very popular amongst students and revision for exams. So keep a journal. Next time that you think to yourself, I feel more productive right now, I feel like I could do this, take a note of the time. And then when you start stringing these moments together, over time a pattern may emerge as to when you feel like this. And then you can start to look at this in terms of waves on a map and gain a greater understanding as to when you feel you're at your most productive and at your least productive, and start to map out your day and your activities and your tasks around this. It's worth noting that it is of course possible to override our waves and our rhythms. You are able to push that peak level of performance at a constant flat plateau for an extended period of time when we have to work towards deadlines, or we have to ensure that we finish something in a certain point of time. But doing this builds up toxins and cortisol and everything that you don't really need in your system, and it's what leads to burnout, it's what leads to stress. So when you push yourself against what your body's natural rhythms wish to do, this is what is often adding and fueling to the mental struggle and physical struggle that you may encounter on a day-to-day basis. Now, within those rhythms, what can you do with your tasks? Because it could be a case of you are at your maximum productivity, and you lend your energies to a task that perhaps does not require as much energy than it needs, answering emails, writing messages, for example. So how can you determine what tasks to do and when in a day? Well, for this, I'm personally a big fan of the Eisenhower matrix. Eisenhower, as in Dwight D. Eisenhower, the US president, who was renowned, of course, being a general in the US Army and then president of the United States, as being tasked with making critical decisions in a very short space of time. And he was renowned for being a highly effective decision maker. And when asked about his secret, to greatly and grossly paraphrase, he would talk about tasks being either important or urgent, rarely a combination of the two. So the Eisenhower matrix breaks down your tasks on an axis, a measure of their importance and their level of urgency. In terms of importance, it's how relevant and important is it to you at this particular point in time. So, for example, if you were a student and you have a exam or a large assessment on the history of 17th century Paris, for example, anything relating to the 17th century of Paris would be in your highly important camp. And the further away you get from that, the less important it becomes. If you have a job and you're thinking about how to prioritize what you do for your job, what is the thing that's most important for you in your job? If it's building revenue, money, or producing things, of course, the thing that you're tasked with doing within this company is the most important thing. And then the further you get away from it becomes less important. Urgency presents a time-sensitive issue, whereby if it is highly urgent, if it is not addressed right now, will cause you greater problems further down the road. Or it's something that you can't ignore and will simply get louder and louder until you're forced to not ignore it. And of course, less urgent means that you don't suffer any penalty from engaging with it at this particular point in time. That's not to say it couldn't become more urgent if not addressed in due course. Let's have a look at the matrix and think about how we can place our own tasks into it. So the Eisenhower matrix is a matrix of 4 squares. Here you have very important and very urgent. Here you have not very important, and not urgent. Down here you have not important, very urgent, and here you have not important and not urgent. So the idea of the matrix is that in a particular day, if you know you have decisions or tasks you need to do or need to make, classify them. One of the biggest challenges and blockers to productivity, I think, is that we can take too linear or straight a mindset when it comes to breaking down tasks. We look at tasks in a list, which are purely there in, say, chronological order of when we were given the tasks to complete in the first place. They're not necessarily taking into account their weight, they're not necessarily taking into account the energy required to do them. It's just a series of things that are be ticked off. And of course, if we compare and combine that with our chronobiology, with the ultradian rhythms, that could be setting ourselves up to fail. So in these quadrants, you have very important and very urgent. It's highly, highly relevant and important to you, the task. And it's also very, very urgent. So if you do not address this immediately, it will have serious repercussions for what you are trying to do. Next up, we have very important but not urgent, whereby the task is highly relevant and important to you, but it doesn't necessarily have to be dealt with right now. It's something you can schedule and work towards later. Not important but very urgent would mean that this isn't something super relevant to what you need to do, but it will be something that needs to be handled very quickly because it could get in the way of you fulfilling other tasks. For example, it could be somebody like your manager approaches you and needs you to do a report for them by the end of the day. Now, this isn't something that you're going to benefit from because it's for your manager and what they need to report on, for example, but it is something that you can't ignore, and if you don't do, will probably get louder and louder until it takes you away from the other tasks that you need to do. And then, or a fire alarm, that would be very urgent, right? Not very important to your role, but it's something you have to work with. And then not important and not urgent. These are all the things that are distractions, basically. Talking about last night's telly or film, or some new music, or any kind of cultural discussion, small talk, important, but if you for social bonding, but of course if you do have tight deadlines, then we need to figure out what things to leave behind and what things to keep. So basically anything that falls into this category you need to do first. Anything that falls into this category you can schedule, plan for. Anything that falls into this category, it would be ideal if you could delegate, so you could pass the task on to somebody else who could do it for you on your behalf. And of course for this category here we can ignore. So the way you can use this matrix is that you would have a look at all the tasks that you need to do in a typical day. What do I need to do that day? You could have way more than 10, you could have less than 10. But the idea is that you place these tasks in the categories that you feel they belong in. So it could be that you've got this here, you've got this here, you've got that there, there's that as well there, and you've got that there as well. Then it means that when you're planning your day and you're setting yourself up, you of course make allowances for scheduling these things in first and finding an eased appropriate point, usually in line with your productivity, that you could come to these. If you know that you have these on your plate, figure out who can I hand these to that might be better placed. Usually there'll be somebody else who requires or is important to that task you've been given. It needs to be done, but they would be better if they did it, if they could do it for you instead. And today I'm going to shut out this noise because it's nothing to do with me right now. So this can of course be unique to people. That's why it's very difficult to actually give very specific examples, because everybody may have their own way of doing it. But as an exercise of putting down everything that you do in a day and placing it into these camps, you may discover some interesting things about yourself. So for example, I've worked with people where I ask them to conduct this exercise, to do this exercise, and it turns out that a vast majority of tasks they place here in the upper left quadrant are very important and very urgent. Now really, this category is firefighting. You don't really want to get to a point in your life where you are having to deal with highly important, influential activities on a firefighting basis. You need to do everything straight away. You need to work on everything right now, because if you don't, everything's going to fall apart. Your life really wants to be more like this. The majority of your tasks are placed in an easy and convenient scheduling process that you can come to tasks as and when you need to, and you're free to delegate the non-important stuff to other people. But of course this may be telling you why you're so stressed, that perhaps you're placing greater importance on tasks that actually aren't that important. One exercise to do if you find that you're in this camp is really question, is it important? Distill down what is most important to you. What is most relevant? Is it relevant? Is it going to have an impact on your goals? And if the answer is no, then take it away from importance. Put it down here. Master the art of delegation, which of course is another video series entirely unto itself. So there you have a little primer on your chronobiology and productivity. I hope you've enjoyed this short video. If you do enjoy the educational aspects of life or exploring history and more, then please do consider subscribing to the English Gentleman ASMR. I look forward to having you join me next time. Until then, goodbye.